Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SB Reacts where today we have ourselves a track from an act named Skies in Orange titled 11. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on YouTube. Apparently this is off there, and is it debut or debut? Either of those two, their very first album titled Atlas, and we're going to listen through it from start till finish. And we're going to hear what we think. Let's do it, let's go. Apollo 11, right? It's really fascinating with the panning of the toms. And just being able to sort of like hang there with those ambient layers, it's just really clever stuff.
Space is open to us now, and our eagerness to share its meaning is not governed by the efforts of others. We go into space because whatever mankind must undertake, free men must fully share. Above and beyond the increases I have earlier requested in space activities, to provide the funds which are needed to meet the following national goals. First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish. We propose to accelerate the development of the appropriate lunar spacecraft. We propose to develop alternate liquid and solid fuel boosters, much larger than any now being developed, until certain which is superior.
But just having that voiceover from the president at that point in time is just so tremendous. It's just so, you know, like poignant, and amongst the music, trying to create this sort of ambient atmosphere with the guitar, bass, and drums that supports and a monologue on top of it. Great use of sub drop there for a bit of from the lower range, make it a bit more cinematic. Almost sounds like the rocket taking off a little bit, right? The explosion that occurs there. Yeah, that was Really sensible guitar solo there, lifting it up as the rocket goes into space. And then the come down at the end. It sort of does highlight just how incredible it is that we were able to accomplish this in the first place, especially in the 60s, where the technology isn't nearly as advanced as it is today. The fact that we were able to get someone to the moon, get people to the moon and then back, was just unbelievable. It's immediately impressive, and I think it's a really cool thing to write a song about, but we're going to talk about it more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Skies in Orange titled 11. The song is off of the album Atlas. Now, what do we think this track is about? I think it is about the first landing on the moon, about the moon landing, you know, our first attempt at trying to, well, you know, to get there, which, you know, was an absolutely incredible thing when it occurred there. I think that it's poignant for the president to discuss how important it was for them to accelerate and move towards that, to sort of talk about, you know, with a great speech, how meaningful it was for human beings at that point in time to look outside of the Earth and sort of explore the galaxy, I suppose, you know, for that first step to be accomplished, with all the work that they were putting in order to make it occur. Because I think there were a few countries around that point that were trying to get there, and I think that was the first successful attempt, if I'm not mistaken. I think it does a good job of asserting the political climate, the socio-economic climate. At that point in time, you see a lot of people that were tuning in for the moon landing, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was one of the first times they had color television for it, I could be wrong. It was a massive moment in history. And so I think to write a song that only has the countdown to the liftoff, to the beginning of the speech, you know, that one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, just a beautiful saying. To have those in different points as we go through the track tells a story without overcomplicating it. The song doesn't need us to sing it. It doesn't need us to sort of like express ourselves beyond those samples and points inserted, and I think the music does a great job of covering everything else that's required. But yeah, I think the use of samples to communicate the historical context and tell the story was really important there for different perspectives that were important to the subject matter. I think that having a lack of like sung or spoken lyrics as well, like I can't imagine a way where it wouldn't be kind of awkward to have sung parts in between that. It would have just been a little bit sort of maybe attention grabby, especially when we did have those lead guitar layers and stuff like that. Part of the strength of this track was how much space it had within its guitar, bass, and drum layers. There's only a few musicians that I've reviewed where they do that. They specifically only use like examples of quotes and speeches and stuff like that in their music, and it's usually transcendent. In fact, yeah, I think a big focus for this track was space in general, not just from what was discussed within it, but also because of the space it allowed with the way that the guitars, bass, and drums were played. I think that the atmosphere created by those delayed or reverb-soaked guitar parts and the sides, especially in the beginning, they sound very gentle, but they're also kind of distant, and it's on the sides of the stereo field as opposed to being too resonant in the center to kind of like create that environment in the headphones and speakers. There are occasional little bits of feedback from the guitar, or it kind of flutters in a way that's quite dynamic and very organic, and I feel like we're not trying to sort of communicate too much with the guitars at first. It's simply creating like a couple of triads that are arpeggiated without being too opinionated. It's a very somber feel, especially with the way that the drums are combined with the various sort of like snare, kick, and tom layers. I think having the cymbal parts come in the heavier sections was smart, because that just adds extra sort of elevation and sort of like power to it. You want that in the section, especially when things was really starting to rise in with the power chords on the guitar there. You want that extra bit of oomph there, but having a quieter drum part with the guitar at the start is almost like things being planned out and prepared for the big launch. And to be fair, there were more sort of like hi-hats, I suppose, in the back of the speech. There were some cymbals, but we get into like the crash and more sort of like heavier sounding elements in like the chorus section. I just think that's a fantastic choice. We've got staging of the various guitar and drum parts that segment the piece as more of a journey and keep it like less linear, I suppose. But it's also how much utility we get out of these various ideas, because we're allowing ourselves to play really kind of unique, interesting beats, especially on the drum kit, for example. There we have like just like an unpredictable, I suppose, to a certain extent, rhythm there. We're not sort of relying on straightforward quarter eighths or 16th note grooves or sequencing there. We have like less predictable accents, at least on first bit. Like they do repeat the way they're kind of phrasing their drum beat in certain accents, but it's just done the way where it's not sort of like very typical or generic. It adds a sort of an air of mystery to it through that, and I think again an earthier tone. I think as we get into the heavier kind of octave chords and power chord elements on the guitar's distortion, just the contrast between those earlier takes and the more sort of like solid ones just is very impactful in a listening experience, but also I think reflects what we're trying to sort of like initiate, like with the you know, the aircraft taking off, you know, the rocket taking off there. You want it to sound more powerful at that bit to simulate that approach. And the guitar solo that we have later on there, you know, like navigating around the frequency spectrum in the mid to upper range there is just a lovely layer on top as the guitar and the other musical parts soar. I mean, to be fair though, the solo was quite articulate, and there were some interesting sort of like sub-leady kind of tremolo parts which just further fleshed out the sort of like the sub leads there, but ultimately it's just I'm satisfied with it. And it's still kind of ambient in a weird way. It's like we're playing these notes that harmonize neatly with the progressions and the harmonies and also the bass lines. We have the bass guitar being quite supportive in this. It's nice to have the bass not too sort of all complicated in a track where there's meant to be space but enough sort of complexity or differentiation with the guitar bass parts to keep it intriguing. The bass underneath driving forward, you have that guitar solo placed in a position where it's just again is unexpected because of again how non-committal a lot of the early guitar parts are to establish an identity. And these occasional like fade-ins of certain notes there, violining of the volume pedal as well is kind of neat. And you just like, it's more almost sounds like a synthesizer at some parts there with the guitar playing, but just it's a lovely sound design. So I think if I was to comment on a couple of extra things outside of the way things were done with the sample takes, it's that there was a lot of really interesting, curious guitar and drum parts played there, where they simultaneously provided a really interesting sort of aesthetic to the piece that suited the kind of uncertainty going into the commitment of the plane, of the rocket taking off, but also that structurally it was just really sound, and there was absolutely no filler within the 5 minutes 31. The studio production was fantastic as well. I just usually talk about like 2 or 3 things within these sort of like videos so as not to make them half an hour long, because there's a lot to appreciate in a track like this. It sounds commercial grade to me. I'm thankful that it was an interesting, unique story. It's one I haven't really heard a lot about space travel specific to this, and if the entire album Atlas is songs like this, I think it's going to be an absolute banger. And it just helps that the instruments were played really well with all these different ideas presented. You know, if there'd been any slip-ups or sort of like discordant parts, it would have been distracting, but we didn't have that here. They clearly know what they're doing. And thank you for watching my review of this track from an act named Skies in Orange titled 11. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show them some love via their various social medias and their YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.